Welcome to Urban Roots, the podcast that takes a deep dive into the little-known stories from urban history.
We're your hosts. I'm Vanessa Quirk.
And I'm Daphne Hussein Wetzel. And we're so excited to kick off our first season with an in-depth look at the rich African-American history of my hometown, Cincinnati.
You can think of this episode as a kind of prelude of sorts. We're going to go back, way back, to Cincinnati's beginnings and explore how race and racism shaped the city from the start.
And we'll see how throughout the city's history, African-American communities have always banded together to not only persevere, but thrive, despite the adversity.
History is the key, as I tell folks. If you don't know where you came from, you definitely don't know where you are, and you surely don't know where you're going.
That's Dr. Eric Jackson, an expert on the African-American history that has shaped Cincinnati.
I am Dr. Eric Jackson, professor of history at Northern Kentucky University and also director of the Black Studies program.
For those unfamiliar with Cincy, the city is bounded by big hills to the north and the Ohio River to the south. Cross the river, and you're in Kentucky.
When Cincinnati was founded in 1788, Ohio was a free state. Kentucky was not. But that doesn't mean that African Americans were welcomed to Ohio with open arms.
Ohio never was an enslavement state. It was a so-called free state, but at the same time, it instituted segregation laws as early as 1804, with what are called the Black Codes. In 1805, the Black Codes, which forced African Americans who moved to Ohio, Cincinnati specifically, to pay the state a security deposit of $500 to ensure what was called good conduct.
When you said the $500 security deposit, I was on mute, but I went, "Buh," because like that must have been a huge amount of money in this time. So was that a common way to kind of enforce, I guess, like essentially prevent African Americans from coming to Ohio?
That was the objective of the Black Codes, which didn't stop them from coming because it was better than what they experienced other places that were defined as the South.
And as African Americans settled in this free city across the river from an enslavement state, a network of freedom fighters grew. Cincinnati
becomes, again, one of the major routes of the Underground Railroad. Some historians argue that 60% of folks who escaped the South using the Underground Railroad came through Cincinnati. So some folks stayed in Cincinnati once they came. You had two basic communities in Cincinnati that starts to develop. One was called Little Africa and one was called Bucktown. And those two places were a mixture of free African Americans who had traveled to Cincinnati, fugitive African Americans who decided to stay in Cincinnati, and folks who were already of African Americans who were born in Cincinnati as free people of color. And so those communities of Bucktown and Little Africa, they start to become a linchpin for other African Americans to travel there, to get jobs there, to educate themselves there.
But as Cincinnati's industry grew and the city's population expanded, white and black racial tensions heightened.
And so the perception was African Americans were traveling, migrating to Cincinnati and taking jobs away from whites, particularly poor whites. And so the system had navigated and manipulated poor whites into believing that folks of African descent were coming into the city stealing their jobs. And so a riot occurred, first one in 1829. There's another one in the 1830s. There's another one in the 1840s. There's another one in the 1850s. And then it's like every decade up until the start of the Civil War, there's an urban riot in Cincinnati.
The 1841 riot was particularly vicious. Apparently, a drought and heat wave combined. It dried up the river, slowed down all work, and stirred up a lot of anger.
A band of white Kentuckians crossed the river and started to attack any African Americans in their path. And then a mob of white Cincinnatians joined in, shooting cannons, and black men tried to defend themselves and their families with muskets and rifles.
Local officials took over 300 African American men to jail for, quote, their own protection. But that left women, children, and homes very vulnerable.
People were beaten, homes and stores were destroyed, and after the riots, some African Americans decided to get out of downtown completely, and small pockets of Black communities moved to the more rural villages surrounding Cincinnati.
But others stayed in Cincinnati and responded to the riots by joining groups and forming institutions designed to protect African Americans. Institutions like the Zion Baptist Church, located downtown at the time, which was one of the unofficial headquarters of the Underground Railroad.
That is, until the city of Cincinnati decided it was time to develop downtown.
City leaders want to figure out a way to start developing downtown Cincinnati, but only for a certain group of people. And the certain group of people are people who look like them. And they're not talking about poor whites, and they're not talking about African Americans.
At the time, most of the city's poor Irish and German laborers were working in the West End neighborhood, where the meatpacking industry was located. It was a poor and densely packed place.
And so they developed a plan on how to develop the city and how to force migrate African Americans to the West End by not giving them the opportunity to buy land in other parts of the city that was growing.
As African Americans were forced into the West End, its white population diminished and moved on to other parts of Cincinnati. And over time, the Black community starts to make the West End their own.
They start to develop Black churches. They start to develop their own types of educational system. They start to develop their own civic clubs and societies. So they take the way they're driven into the West End and they create their own institutions to take care of themselves. And they prosper. I mean, they prosper mightily. They create their own businesses, their own stores, their own entertainment. People want to talk about the Cotton Club in New York. There's a Cotton Club in Cincinnati.
It was the center of the Black culture, you know. All of your sororities and fraternities gave their dances there. All of your private clubs gave their dances there through the week. Mostly Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday night, you know. And that was the hub of everything.
There's multiple theaters and performances in the West End. I mean, it's a vibrant community. It's a vibrant part of the city for African Americans. When people migrate to Cincinnati during the Great Migration in the early 1900s, they end up in the West End not because it's as a happenstance. They hear that the West End is the place to go because everything they need is in the West End.
For decades, the West End was synonymous with Black Cincinnati. But then, another city plan was developed, the Cincinnati City Council's 1948 Urban Development Plan.
During the late 1940s, the city of Cincinnati announced its urban renewal plans for the West End. Rapidly deteriorating housing, overcrowded living conditions, and a multitude of other urban ills were cited as the reasons behind the urban renewal plan.
And around that same time, the Federal Highway Act was passed, which called for an interstate highway that would cut through Cincinnati. And the chosen location?
Say it with me now.
The West End.
So the interstate cuts the West End in half and demolishes about half of the economic development that African Americans have created for decades. The same thing happens in Detroit at the same time. The interstate cuts through the Black community in Detroit. The same thing happens in Charlotte, North Carolina. So Cincinnati is not the only city that goes through this same pattern. When there's an interstate that needs to be created, the land that's acquired to do it by the federal government tends to come from the Black community. So when a highway comes in and breaks down the vibrancy of the West End, African Americans have to figure out a different community to migrate to.
In our next episodes, we're going to pick up where Dr. Jackson left off and explore 3 neighborhoods where African Americans settled: Avondale, Evanston, and South Cumminsville.
But we felt it was important to start here with this early history because these themes repeat again and again.
Exactly. I mean, these themes of top-down planning versus bottom-up resistance, basically, or resilience. I mean, that's a consistent theme throughout the whole season.
And I agree. And that's another really important thing to note because it's because of these different struggles with development plans or highways or street widenings in the past. It's why Cincinnati feels so disconnected today. All 52 neighborhoods each feel so divided in their own way. It's these stories that I find probably most fascinating and might have the most trouble finding more information on in general. They're like the hidden stories.
Yeah.
The ones that we're trying to pull out from the archives and stuff and piecing things together.
Yeah, and that's like a huge part of why this project has been like important to us, right? Like we've been reaching out to people in communities, asking about what they remember, asking them what their elders taught them, what they told them about what they remember, because so much of this history, unfortunately, has just been lost to time, right? A lot of it isn't in archives.
Living in Cincinnati, I know that I did not know half of these stories until I started working on this project, and I knew this was going to be very, very important to do.
Totally.
But I had no idea how impactful it would be just to me.
Yeah, and hopefully it gives other people like a sense of pride in Cincinnati too, because like for me personally, I had never really thought about the fact that, the geography of Cincinnati, the fact that it is on this border of North and South would make it so pivotal to really American history.
Yeah, and honestly, as a Cincinnatian, I get super annoyed sometimes because Cincinnati is always portrayed as this mediocre place, like precisely because it's so, in the middle of things.
Yeah.
But it really is not that way at all. I really don't think people appreciate how special this city is because we're in the middle, because it's a hodgepodge of people. We're at this nexus point of so many cultures and histories, and there's so much more diversity here than people realize. And so it's really been inspiring to have witnessed all of this firsthand through this project.
Totally. Okay, so again, this is just a prelude to our Cincinnati series. If you like what you heard, please share it. Please spread the word. Subscribe today to Urban Roots.
I have to really, really thank, all the community members that have been a part of this. But I also would like to thank everybody who's donated to our Fundly fundraising campaign. And, I just have to say, thank you as well to ArtsWave and Invest in Neighborhoods. They've just been so integral in getting these audio documentaries out.
Yes, thank you guys so much. And also a huge thanks to our editor, Connor Lynch.
Should we do our tagline?
Oh yeah, totally, go for it.
Urban Roots, looking back so we can move forward.